My name is Margaret Hall. The night my son looked at me across the dinner table and said nothing, not even goodbye, was the night. Something inside me collapsed quietly. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. The chair across from me was still warm when I noticed the absence of his plate. Noah hadn't finished his meal. He hadn't even touched the roasted chicken, the same recipe I used to make when he was 10 and had a fever and cried for me in the middle of the night. Now he sat there, a man in his late 30s, lips tight, face unreadable, with his polished wife beside him. Delilah. Even her name felt like something too slippery to hold. "I think it's time we had our own space," she had said a few minutes earlier. Noah didn't look up from his phone. When I asked what she meant, our own space from what, she only smiled and gently placed her manicured hand on his wrist. I remember watching the way she looked at my old oak cabinets like they disgusted her. The way she refused to sit in the seat near the window where the light hit just right. The same seat where Noah used to eat peanut butter sandwiches while doing homework. This wasn't sudden. This was slow like rot. And I had ignored every sign. Delilah had been dropping hints for months. The new curtains, the removed pictures, the subtle way she replaced my teacups with pristine white mugs from some expensive store downtown. "Neutral looks better on camera," she'd say. But that night, the neutral became nauseating. "I know this is your house," she said, almost sweetly. "But maybe it's time to pass the torch, you know?" Noah didn't correct her, didn't defend me, just chewed. Silently. He used to light up when I'd walk into the room, used to call me Mama in that little drawl, even when he was 25. But since marrying Delilah, that word had disappeared. I became Mom. Then Ma, then mostly just not addressed at all. I stared at him and waited for him to say something to say. It wasn't what I thought, that she didn't mean I should leave, that I wasn't being erased in real time. But all he did was look up briefly, meet my eyes with that hollow expression, and shake his head. That one shake, that's all it took. The meal grew cold between us. I watched the steam fade from the mashed potatoes, from the green beans I had blanched just the way he liked. Everything on that plate came from my hands, from my memories of what he once loved. But he pushed the plate away. "I'm tired," Delilah said, standing. "We'll talk more in the morning." Noah followed without a word. I sat at the table for a long time after they left, long enough for the light in the hallway to flicker off, long enough for the silence to become louder than any insult they could have spoken aloud. I didn't cry, not that night. I just sat there thinking, this is the house I built with hunger, with skipped meals and unspoken tears, and now they want to take it from me with a smile and a shake of the head. I couldn't sleep, so I walked the creaking hallway, each board a memory. The one near the bathroom still bent from when Noah jumped too hard at age 9. I never fixed it because I loved how it reminded me of him at that age, weightless, trusting, full of light. Now the whole house felt heavier. I opened the old photo album I kept under my bed. Page after page of birthday parties where I was always behind the camera, never in the frame. Noah with icing on his nose. Noah with a handmade backpack I sewed myself because we couldn't afford store-bought. Noah with his first bike, a second-hand frame painted fresh at midnight while he slept. Every image whispered, "You gave, and gave, and gave." And now he was silent. I whispered out loud, "You don't even know what it cost. Do you, Noah? Not just money, but pieces of my body, my pride, my womanhood." Nights I went to bed with a cramp in my stomach from eating nothing but a dry cracker just so he could have a hot lunch the next day. He never knew. I never told him, and that might have been my biggest mistake. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Delilah's voice, measured, sweet, and calculated. "I was thinking we could convert your room into the nursery." My blood ran cold. She said it like she was talking about rearranging the spice rack. My room. The one place in this house that still held my breath. The one I built for myself after years of sharing beds, skipping warmth. I stood in the hallway out of their sight, my hand against the wall for balance. Noah didn't say a word, just nodded. I walked back to my room without making a sound. But something had shifted, not in the house. in me, and it was the same thing that built this house in the first place. There was a time when every dollar I made came with the sting of a needle in my thumb and the ache of hunger twisting in my gut. It began in a 2-room apartment above a barber shop. Noah was only 2, his father freshly buried, and the world already expecting me to know how to stand tall again. But no one tells you that grief doesn't leave space for breath, let alone motherhood. Still, I picked up a needle. I started hemming skirts for the neighborhood women, sewing buttons onto uniforms, patching jeans, and eventually tailoring wedding dresses I'd never wear. I worked until my fingers were raw, until I saw thread in my dreams. And every time someone asked if I was managing, I smiled and said, "We're doing fine." Because what else could I say? That I had skipped dinner again. That the cabinets were full of cans I couldn't afford to open because I was saving them for Noah. Noah never knew. I made sure of that. He always had milk. I made up songs to distract him when my stomach growled too loud at night. Told him stories about knights and castles while sipping hot water from a chipped cup and pretending it was soup. It wasn't just hunger, it was silence. I swallowed everything, stitched it into my seams like the skirts I made for women who pitied me in secret. And when I finally saved enough after 8 years of sewing, cleaning houses on weekends, skipping birthdays and dresses and dignity, I bought the land. People said it was too far from town, said it was too ambitious, but I saw it. A house with a porch big enough to sit on after dinner. A garden Noah could run through barefoot. A kitchen where he could do homework while I cooked real meals, not broth from bones boiled twice. Every inch of that house came from sacrifice. From nights I ate nothing, from shoes I didn't buy, from coats I mended instead of replaced. Every brick held a secret I never told. And it's funny, looking back, I never once thought he'd turn his back on it. I remember the day I laid the first stone. It was hot, too hot for spring. I wore gloves 3 sizes too big and a hat that had belonged to my father. Noah, still small, sat on a pile of gravel playing with his toy trucks. "Mama, is this gonna be our real house?" I wiped the sweat from my eyes and smiled, even as my legs trembled from the weight of a bag of cement I shouldn't have been lifting alone. "Yes, baby," I said. "A real house? Ours." He grinned like the world had just opened its arms to him. And for a moment I believed it had. I worked on that house in bursts during evenings and weekends. Sometimes neighbors helped out, but mostly it was just me and whatever strength I hadn't spent surviving that day. I hung drywall, laid tile, learned how to frame a door by watching free library DVDs late at night. Noah grew up with the sound of a hammer as his lullaby. I thought I was giving him everything. A home built from love, from pain, from sleepless nights and quiet strength. I never realized I was also giving him something else, something I couldn't name. Then, entitlement. He grew up never knowing what it cost. And maybe that was my fault. Maybe in shielding him from every hunger pang, every shiver, every bite of shame, I made it too easy for him to forget what mattered. Years later, when the house was finally finished, we moved in with nothing but 2 mattresses and a second-hand kitchen table. But it was ours. He was 12. I remember him running through the halls, touching the walls like he couldn't believe they were real. I remember sitting on the floor of the empty living room, watching the light spill through the windows we'd installed together. We didn't have curtains, or even real plates, but it felt full. I made us soup that night, real soup with meat and potatoes. It was the first time in years I had eaten without calculating what I was taking away from him. And yet I still gave him the bigger bowl. Some habits don't die. One night, while fixing a broken chair leg in the garage, Noah came in with a school paper in his hand. He had written about the strongest woman he knew. It was me. He wrote about how I never gave up, about how I built our house with her own hands and heart. I cried that night, not loudly, just a few silent tears down my cheeks while he slept, knowing that maybe, just maybe, he had seen me. But kids forget. Or maybe life teaches them to. College came. Then Delilah. And the house changed tone after that. The paint was still the same. The curtains I'd finally splurged on still hung in the living room. But the warmth started leaking through the walls like heat escaping through a crack in winter. That's the thing about sacrifices. If you don't tell anyone what they cost, they assume they were free. And maybe I should have told him. Maybe I should have pulled him aside one night and said, "Do you know how many times I went to bed with an empty stomach so you wouldn't?" But I didn't, because mothers like me, we don't say it. We just keep stitching through the pain. It didn't happen all at once, the breaking. The first crack came the day I tried to lift a bucket of mortar and felt something in my lower back pull like an old zipper catching on flesh. I didn't cry out. I simply leaned against the half-built wall, stared at the ground, and counted slowly to 10 until the pain dulled to a background hum. That hum never left me. I didn't go to a doctor, didn't take a day off, just added it to the list of things I endured in silence, like the bone-deep fatigue, the way my fingers had begun to curve from holding tools too long, too tight, too often. The house cost me my body, but that never mattered to me, because every ache felt like love. I remember mixing concrete while Noah watched from the porch steps. He had a book in his hand, but he wasn't reading it, just holding it like he wanted me to believe he was too busy to help. "Don't strain yourself, Mama," he said one day, his voice cracking from puberty. I smiled at him, sweat pooling at the base of my neck. "This house isn't going to build itself, baby." He nodded, then disappeared inside. I didn't call him back. I could have asked for help, but I wanted him to be a child for just a little longer. To not remember his mother as someone worn down by work, hunched and sore, bent over boards and nails. Let him remember me strong. Let him think the house appeared by magic, not blisters and bruises. But that fantasy came at a cost. Years later, when he started talking about how lucky he'd been to grow up in a decent house, I realized he truly didn't know. Didn't remember the winter I stayed up at night burning newspaper in a metal pail to keep the unfinished rooms from freezing solid. Didn't remember the summer I got heat stroke on the roof because the shingles wouldn't wait for clouds. Didn't remember the night I fainted in the garage after working a double shift and still staying up to sand down the kitchen cabinets because I wanted everything to be beautiful for him. He didn't remember because I made sure he never saw. That's the double edge of motherhood. If you do it right, they think they did it themselves. There's a scar on my left forearm from where I dropped a pane of glass. I'd been trying to install it in the living room window by myself. It slipped, sliced through skin like paper. I wrapped it in a towel, tied it with electrical tape, and kept going. Noah came home from school later and said, "What's that?" I told him I burned myself baking cornbread. He nodded and moved on. That was the day I realized something deeper. If I kept hiding my pain one day, even I wouldn't know how deep it went. But still I kept hiding it. Because the house needed to be finished. Because the house was more than shelter, it was a monument. A testament to the fact that I didn't give up. That I survived. That even after losing the man I loved, even after scraping through every indignity, I had created something that could not be taken away. Or so I believed. Sometimes when the hammer was too heavy and my back screamed with every motion, I would stop and look around at the bones of the house framing beams, piles of tools, paint cans, and whisper to no one, "Let this mean something." I needed it to mean something. Because if it didn't, then what was all of it for? I remember this one particular night I had just finished staining the stairs. The house was nearly complete. The kitchen was painted. The doors were on. The windows finally sealed. I sat down in the corner of the living room and cried, not because I was sad, but because I couldn't believe it was real. I had built it. Me. And then, out of the quiet, Noah walked in. He looked around and said, "It's good, Mama. Just that. Not amazing. Not thank you. Not, how did you do this alone? Just good." It pierced deeper than I admitted to myself at the time. Years later, I overheard him on the phone with Delilah. "She's proud of the house," he said with a half-laugh, "but it's just an old place. Needs updates. I've already started planning." I didn't say anything. Just stood in the hallway invisible again. That house wasn't just wood and nails. It was built from the ribs of my hope. From the brittle faith that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, one day I'd be safe, loved, protected. Instead, it became the stage for my erasure. The very place I had poured myself into was now the place where I would slowly be erased. Room by room, nail by nail, memory by memory. When Noah began replacing things, the tile I laid with trembling hands, the sink I chose after skipping meals for 3 weeks, it felt like he was gutting me from the inside out. He didn't understand. How could he? To him, it was just renovation. To me, it was burial. And now all I have left are my stories. The ones I never told him. The ones buried in each crack in the floor, each dent in the doorframe, each creak of the stairs. Stories like this. I once sat outside this house at midnight in the dead of winter and prayed for a sign. Any sign? That I wasn't crazy. That all this pain would be worth it. That Noah would one day understand. But the night didn't answer me. It never does. I saw it the moment he stepped off the plane. Something had shifted. It wasn't just the haircut, the button-down shirt that fit too perfectly, or the way he didn't run into my arms like he used to after school. It was in his eyes. Noah had gone away to college with the same eyes he had as a boy, full of hunger and hope. But the ones that returned were different, sharper, guarded, like someone had taught him to see the world not as a place to belong to, but as a place to manage. He hugged me, but it felt rehearsed. His hand patted my back 2 quick taps. "Hey, Ma," he said, his voice deeper but hollow, like he was performing a memory instead of living it. And then he looked past me, at the house. I remember that moment like a bruise I keep pressing just to remind myself it was real. He looked at the home I built with every inch of my soul, and frowned. "This porch is smaller than I remember." I laughed, trying to brush it off. "Well, I guess everything looks bigger when you're little." He nodded, lips tightening. "Still, it could use some work." That was the first time he said it. Work. As if the house was a project. A fixer-upper, as if it hadn't already cost me everything but my breath. I watched him walk up the front steps, noticing things he never used to. The peeling paint, the uneven brick line near the garden. He used to sit on that brick edge and feed birds with me. Now he stepped over it like it was a mistake I'd made. Inside, he said, "Did you always have this wallpaper?" Noah had lived in that house for 18 years. He had drawn on that wallpaper when he was 6. I'd spent 3 hours scrubbing out his crayon masterpiece of a dragon and never quite finished. "Yes," I said softly, looking at the faint ghost of red still behind the coat rack. "It's always been there." "Huh." That was all. "Not. I remember not. You kept it." "Just, huh?" Over dinner, he told me about the city, his finance internship, his new watch, how he now drank his coffee black. He talked with the cadence of someone mimicking confidence, and I nodded through all of it. I was proud. I truly was. But beneath the pride was something else. Distance. He had lived in a shared dorm, survived on ramen and vending machines, and yet somehow returned with the belief that this house, our home, was beneath him now. Like everything I gave him was a phase he'd outgrown. That night, I made his favorite chicken pot pie. The same recipe I used to cook during storms when the lights flickered, and we'd eat by candlelight pretending we were camping. Back then, he'd say it was the best food in the world. Now he took one bite and said, "You ever try rosemary in this? Might give it some dimension." I smiled and nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt the silence between us rise like smoke. Thick, acrid, bitter. The next morning, I caught him standing in the doorway to my sewing room. He didn't step inside, just stared, like it was a museum of a life he didn't understand anymore. "You still sew?" I looked up from the table where I was patching a neighbor's apron. "When I can," he nodded once. "You know, you don't have to do that anymore, right?" I smiled. "Do what?" "Scrape by. You've done enough." It was supposed to be kind. I know that now, but it hit me like a slap. Because I wasn't scraping by. I was still surviving. Still doing what I'd always done, provide, create, contribute. He didn't see that. He just saw old habits. Poverty clinging like dust. Later that week, I found him measuring the living room walls. "What are you doing?" I asked. He glanced up casually, just thinking, this space could be more open, modernized. He wasn't asking. He was planning. That night when I went to bed, I stared at the ceiling and remembered all the nights I slept in a cot while the drywall cured above me. Nights I covered Noah in extra blankets and left myself cold. Nights I stitched dreams into every corner of this house. Now he wanted to gut it, rework it, uplift it as he called it. But what he meant was erase it. Erase the struggle, the sweat, the sacrifice. Erase me. One afternoon we sat on the porch sipping tea. He talked about a girl he'd been seeing, a law student named Delilah. She's got big ideas, he said, smiling. Big ideas, I echoed. She sees the potential in things. Places. People. I raised my eyebrows. And houses? He laughed. Especially houses. That was the first time I felt it, that shadow of things to come. And as the sun dipped below the edge of the garden I planted with my own hands, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Because I knew what was coming. He wouldn't just change the house. He'd let someone else tell him it wasn't worth keeping as it was. And I would be a relic. A sentimental burden in a place they wanted to renovate. That night, I pulled out an old photo from the drawer. One of the few I had of Noah and me. He was 7, covered in dirt from planting our first row of tomatoes. I was behind him laughing. You could just barely see my hand on his shoulder. He used to look at that picture and smile. Now I wasn't sure he remembered it existed. I touched the edge of the frame and whispered to no one. His eyes changed. And once they do, they never change back. The first time I met Delilah, she didn't look me in the eye. She walked into my home in heels too sharp for the worn wood floors, holding a bouquet of white lilies like a peace offering she didn't mean to give. Her nails were perfectly done, not a chip in sight. Her blouse was pressed like she'd stepped out of a department store window. She smiled tight, calculated, and extended her hand. Hi, Mrs. Hall. I've heard so much about you. Her hand was cold. Not just in temperature, but in energy. It was a hand that had never held a crying child at midnight. Never scrubbed a floor. Never built anything that couldn't be unboxed with tissue paper and a receipt. Still, I shook it. I always shake the hand of someone my son loves, even when it feels like a transaction. Noah hovered nearby, proud and nervous. He kept glancing at me like he was waiting for approval, like I was an obstacle he needed cleared before he could proceed with his shiny new life. I offered them tea, which she politely declined. I don't really do caffeine, she said, wrinkling her nose. I almost said it's chamomile, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I served Noah a cup in his favorite mug, the one with the little chip on the handle, and watched him hesitate before taking it. Delilah noticed. Oh, you still use those? Those. The word dropped like vinegar in water. She walked through my house like she was already redecorating in her head. Her eyes skimmed across the family photos. The antique lamp I'd saved 3 months to buy, the embroidered pillows I stitched during quiet nights alone. I love the charm, she said, smiling again. So vintage. Vintage. Not lived in, not homey. Just old. I watched her hands as she walked, gliding across surfaces like she was checking for dust. They were smooth, soft, untouched by labor. They didn't belong in this house. Not because I thought less of her, but because I knew she'd never understand it, never respect what it took to make it. Later that evening, I caught them whispering in the hallway. I just want her to be comfortable with the changes, Delilah said. She will. She just needs time. I closed the door quietly and sat down on my bed, staring at the framed photograph of Noah as a child missing his front tooth. Smiling so wide his eyes disappeared. That boy would have stormed into the kitchen, grabbed my waist, and begged me for pancakes just because he missed me. This man, my son, stood beside a woman who saw my home as a fixer-upper project. And he let her. It started subtly, as these things do. The first time she offered to freshen up the guest bathroom. It's just paint, she said. I'll cover the cost. I smiled. No need. I like it the way it is. A week later, it was painted anyway. Next, the rug in the living room. Too floral, she said. Then the curtains. They make the space feel small. Bit by bit, things disappeared. At first, I told myself it was just taste, a generational difference. But soon it became clear. This wasn't about design. This was about territory. And I was the first thing being quietly moved out. I began to notice how she timed her comments. Always when Noah was just out of the room. Do you ever think about downsizing? She asked me once, sipping from a glass she brought herself. I mean, you're here alone most of the time. Doesn't it feel too big? This house fits me just fine, I said. She tilted her head, smiling like she pitied me. Of course, just a thought. Then she glanced toward Noah returning from the kitchen and shifted her tone like a stage actress flipping scenes. Margaret, this house is so you. I love it. I didn't answer, because I already knew what she was doing. and more importantly, what he wasn't. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found her rearranging my spice rack. "Oh, I hope you don't mind," she said. "I just thought it might be more efficient." Efficient. Like my home was a spreadsheet. I reached for the cinnamon now in a different spot and nodded. "No problem," I said. But I was lying, because everything inside me screamed. The worst part wasn't her cold hands or her calculated smiles, or the way she spoke to me like I was a well-meaning antique that had somehow been left in the middle of the room. It was Noah. He saw it all and said nothing. Every little invasion, every not-so-subtle insult, every just trying to help moment, he witnessed it and chose silence. Or worse, agreement. "That's just Dell," he'd say. "She's a little intense, but she means well." No, she didn't. She meant to reshape my world, to bend my house into her image, and she was doing it with surgical precision. One curtain rod at a time. The night I truly knew I was losing him, we were sitting on the porch. Just me and Noah. The air was still. Fireflies blinked around the garden like sparks from the past. "I ever tell you why I picked this land?" I asked. He shook his head. "I used to walk past it every day carrying groceries. It was just a field. But I'd stop here and look out and think, someday I'll build a home here." He nodded slowly. "You did good, Ma." I looked at him, really looked, but he was already somewhere else. Some future version of this place where I didn't exist, where he'd repainted every wall and replaced every memory with something new. Even me. Especially me. It began with the dinners. At first, they were small gatherings. Noah's friends from the city colleagues, couples who wore designer boots indoors and referred to our neighborhood as charming in a way that felt like a joke I wasn't in on. I made casseroles, dusted off the good dishes, lit candles like I always did when company came. But slowly something shifted. One night as I placed the cornbread on the table, Delilah looked at me with a tight smile and said, "Why don't you take a break, Margaret? We've got everything covered." I blinked. "Oh, I'm fine. I enjoy this." Her smile didn't move. "Of course you do. But tonight's for relaxing. Just go ahead and rest in your room, okay?" Noah said nothing. He didn't look up from his wine glass. So I left the dining room and sat alone in my bedroom, listening through the thin walls as laughter bounced around the house I built. The cornbread remained untouched. It happened again. Then again. Soon I wasn't being asked to leave, I was simply not included. I'd come down to find the table already set, my place absent. My dishes replaced with new ones that didn't carry the memories of birthdays and soup during flu seasons. I began eating in the kitchen, quietly, alone. I didn't want to cause a scene. I told myself it wasn't worth the tension, that Noah was just caught in the middle, that Delilah didn't mean harm. She just came from a different world. But each time I folded my napkin in silence, a piece of me folded with it. I started keeping my voice low in the hallways. Not because anyone told me to, just because after a while silence became safer. Delilah began working from home. She claimed the sunroom, my sewing space, as her office. Without asking, "My desk fits better here," she explained. "More light. You understand, right?" I nodded. "Of course." I moved my sewing machine to the basement. It was colder there, damp. But I told myself I was lucky to still have space at all. Even as the basement door started sticking, even as they replaced the locks on the front door and didn't give me a new key, one morning I woke up to find the living room completely rearranged. My armchair, the one I sat in every evening to knit, to rest, to feel like I still belonged, was gone. Replaced by a sterile gray chaise lounge. I walked through the house looking for it, heart racing like I'd lost a friend. Found it in the garage, draped in a plastic sheet like a forgotten prop. No room for it in the new layout, Delilah said when I asked. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed my breath. The final straw came on a Tuesday. I had just finished baking a pie. Apple cinnamon, Noah's favorite. I placed it on the cooling rack, the scent filling the kitchen with a sweetness I hadn't felt in months. Delilah walked in, glanced at the pie, then opened the fridge. "Oh," she said, frowning. "You used the last of the apples." I did. I wanted to surprise Noah. She smiled, a practiced expression. "We were saving those for a salad tonight." I looked at her. She didn't blink. "I can pick up more," I said quietly. "No need," she replied. Next time, maybe ask. That night, they had dinner without me again. The pie sat untouched. I sat in the basement listening to the muffled sound of forks on plates and laughter that no longer included my name. And that's when I realized I hadn't just lost my voice, I had been silenced. Strategically, slowly, permanently. In the weeks that followed, I found myself waking earlier and earlier, not from habit but from anxiety. I'd walk the house before anyone else was up, just to feel like it still belonged to me for a few minutes a day. But even then, I noticed things, more of my belongings disappearing. Trinkets I'd placed in corners of the living room gone. A framed photo of Noah as a child moved to a drawer, my pots and pans replaced with better ones. Noah didn't notice. Or maybe he did and pretended not to, which was worse. One evening, I tried to speak up. We were sitting in the living room, Delilah scrolling through her phone, Noah watching a movie. I cleared my throat. I think we need to talk. Delilah looked up. Of course. What about? I hesitated. I just feel left out. In my own home. Noah looked at me surprised. You're always welcome here, Ma. I stared at him. Am I? Delilah put a hand on his arm. Margaret, we're just trying to create space. You know, for the next chapter. I looked between them. Whose chapter? The silence that followed was my answer. That night, I stood at the window and stared out at the porch. The one I built with my own hands. I thought about the nights I sanded those floorboards until my palms bled. The afternoons I painted them in the sun while Noah napped inside. I remembered him crawling on that porch, taking his first steps there, falling and laughing and saying, again, Mama, again. Now it was just a set piece for strangers. A backdrop to parties I wasn't invited to. And still, I cleaned it every Sunday. Because it was mine, even if no one else remembered. The first picture came down on a Thursday. It was the one of Noah at age 5 sitting on my lap with frosting on his cheeks, laughing mid-scream during his birthday party. I had baked that cake myself with borrowed sugar and secondhand candles. The photo had always hung near the stairs, tilted slightly because the frame was cracked. I noticed it missing when I was dusting. In its place was a minimalist painting, just swirls of blue and gray like a storm trying too hard to be polite. I found the photo face down in a drawer next to a loose pile of batteries. Then the wedding photo disappeared. Not Noah's. Me in a homemade dress holding a bouquet of wildflowers, my late husband grinning at me like I was the only thing left in the world worth looking at. We were poor but proud. That photo had hung above the mantel since Noah was born. Now it was gone. I didn't ask. I already knew. Delilah wanted a clean aesthetic. No history. No clutter. No evidence of a woman who had lived, struggled, and bled into the very walls of this place. Then came the tools. My husband's toolbox lived in the shed. Not because I used it often, but because I couldn't bring myself to part with it. Each dented screwdriver, each oil-stained wrench, it all carried his fingerprints. A man who died too young but left behind a legacy of effort and care. One day I went out there and found the shelves empty. Just a few nails on the floor rolling like teeth knocked loose. When I asked Noah about it, he shrugged. Delilah thought it was junk. She cleared it out to make space for her garden supplies. Junk. The word echoed in my chest like a punch. I tried to put up resistance quietly. I moved one photo back to the wall. Just one. A small one of Noah holding his first report card, proudly showing me the A he got in math. His face was lit up, and mine barely in the background was tear-streaked from pride. The next morning, it was gone again. No one said anything, but the message was clear. I was being edited out, not all at once, just one corner at a time, like I'd never been here at all. I began finding my things boxed up in the garage. A quilt I had made after Noah's birth folded and stacked beneath a label that said, Old Linens. The crocheted doilies my mother had made, too dated. My recipe binder digitized now. Each box was like a coffin, small and neat, containing the ghosts of who I used to be. When I opened one and found the family Bible tucked next to a scented candle and some expired batteries, I sat down right there on the garage floor and wept into my hands. Not loud, just enough to hear myself again. I started to wonder, was I going crazy? Maybe it was just clutter. Maybe the photos didn't match the new paint. Maybe my grief was making me dramatic. But then I found the box labeled N's room. Sort discard. M. Not Mom. Not Margaret. Just a single letter like an error on a spreadsheet. It was my bedroom packed up without a word. And it wasn't just boxes. They had measured the room the week before. I remembered. Delilah had stood at the door measuring tape in hand, talking about better light for the nursery and needing more space for the crib. I thought she was dreaming out loud. I didn't realize she was planning my removal. That night, I went to Noah. He was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, phone in hand. "Noah," I said, my voice trembling, "why is my room being packed?" He looked up, blinking slowly, as if I had interrupted something very important. "Oh, Delilah mentioned wanting to start early. We weren't sure how to bring it up yet." "Bring what up?" He sighed, exasperated. "Ma, look, it's not about you. It's just, this is our home now. We need space. You still have the guest room, right?" I stared at him. The guest room. In the house I built. With my bones. My silence finally cracked. "This isn't just your home, Noah. I raised you here. I carved your initials into the porch beam. I starved so you could sleep with a roof over your head." He looked away, like he couldn't bear to look at the receipts. Delilah walked in holding a paint swatch. "Oh, are we having that talk now?" she said lightly. I left the kitchen and walked outside barefoot into the garden. The soil was still damp from my watering earlier that day. I knelt down, cupped a handful in my palm, and stared at it. How many times had these hands worked this earth? How many meals had come from it? How many mornings had I stood here praying for strength? Now the garden was too rustic. Delilah wanted a cleaner lawn. Sod. Sprinklers. Something manageable. Something fake. When I came back inside, the house smelled different. Not like food. Not like rain on old wood. Not like home. It smelled like citrus cleaner and cold light. It smelled like erasure. The knock came on a Wednesday morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. My life didn't work like that anymore. Visitors were rare, and when they did come, they weren't for me. But this knock had weight. Slow. Intentional. Like someone bringing news that wouldn't leave with them. I opened the door and found a man in a gray coat holding a briefcase. Middle-aged, balding, kind eyes behind thick glasses. "Mrs. Margaret Dawson." "Yes, I'm Timothy Evers, your late husband's estate lawyer. I've been trying to reach you." I blinked. It's been over 20 years since he passed. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am, but something's come up. Something that was overlooked." We sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, though it didn't feel like mine anymore. Timothy placed a folder between us, opened it gently like unveiling a wound. "I was going through old files as we transitioned to digital," he explained. "And I found this, your husband's original will, signed and witnessed before his final revisions." I furrowed my brows. "But we settled everything when he died. I handled the estate. You handled what was left after his medical debts. But this document," he tapped it, "this outlines his wishes regarding the house." I leaned in. My heart quickened. "What does it say?" He slid the paper toward me, there in my husband's neat looping handwriting. "The house at 116 Sycamore Lane is to be held in trust for my wife, Margaret Dawson, for the remainder of her life. Upon her passing, it may be transferred to our son Noah if, and only if, he has not attempted to sell, transfer, or alter the property in her lifetime." I read it twice. Then again. My hands were shaking. I looked up. This means," Timothy smiled gently, "it means the house is yours, legally, fully. No one can force you out. No one can claim ownership or make structural changes without violating the trust." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I was holding the past in my hands, and it was finally holding me back. When I told Noah, he didn't take it well. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "This is our house. Delilah and I have invested so much into it already. We were planning the nursery." My voice was steady. "For once, Noah, this house is in a legal trust. It was never yours to renovate, and certainly not yours to sell. But Dad's will was ignored," I said quietly. "Until now, and what it says is very clear." Delilah stepped into the room, her arms folded. "So you're going to block our family's future over a piece of paper from the 90s. I turned to her. "No, I'm going to protect the home your husband grew up in. The one I built. The one I starved to keep. I watched Noah's face change. For a flicker, I saw the boy in him again, the one who used to run down these stairs shouting, "Mama, I beat my best time," or "Mama, look what I made." That boy looked ashamed. But the man looked angry. "We'll get our own lawyer," he said coldly. "Don't think this is over." I looked at him for a long time. "Do what you need to," I said. "But understand something, Noah. This house isn't just walls and floors. It's ribs and breath. My ribs. My breath. And I won't be erased from it." For the first time in months, I slept with the door open. Not in fear, but in ownership. The air felt different that night. Like the house had exhaled for the first time in years. Like it had been holding its breath too, waiting for someone to remember who gave it life. Over the next few days, the tension thickened. Delilah stopped speaking to me altogether. She moved around the house like a queen in exile, touching things with just her eyes, muttering under her breath about selfish women clinging to dead spaces. I ignored her. I tended to the garden. I baked again, not to please anyone, but because I wanted the smell of cinnamon to rise from my oven. I put my photos back up, all of them. Every crack in the wall, every uneven nail testimony that I had been here, still was, still am. One afternoon, I found a listing open on Noah's laptop. A new house. Bigger, colder. With a shiny kitchen and an HOA. He hadn't told me. But I knew. They were planning to leave. And somehow, I felt peace. Let them go. Let them find whatever version of home they think fits inside a catalog. This house never needed redesigning. It just needed remembering. A week later, Noah came to me. Alone. He sat on the porch beside me, the one I'd just repainted like I did every spring. He didn't speak right away. Then he said quietly, "I didn't know about the will." I nodded. "I believe you. I just thought." Delilah had a vision and I wanted to give it to her. I looked straight ahead. "And where was your vision, Noah? For your mother?" He exhaled slowly. "I forgot. I really forgot what this house meant to you. What it cost you." I smiled, tired but real. "You can forget things when you're never the one who bled for them." The sun was setting. Soft orange glow on the porch rails. The same glow that used to land on his toy cars when he played out here, barefoot and happy. "Ma," he said, "I think we'll move. We need space anyway. And maybe some distance will help." I nodded. He looked at me. "I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. But it was something, and something was more than I'd had in years." They left on a Tuesday morning. Noah didn't want a scene. "We'll keep it quiet, Ma," he said, as if I were the type to clutch his pant leg and beg them to stay. As if I hadn't already watched them pull me out of every photograph, every inch of this house like a stain they were trying to bleach. Delilah didn't say goodbye. She came down the stairs carrying the last of her box's heels clicking on the floor I had polished for decades. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Just a stiff nod like I was the maid seeing her off to her new mansion. I stood by the window curtain drawn back just slightly and watched as they loaded up the car. The crib went in last. It was brand new, still in the box. A purchase she made long before she had the decency to ask if there'd be space for it in this house. Noah came in one last time. Alone. He walked around slowly as if trying to memorize things that had always been in front of him. The nick in the wall where he crashed his tricycle. The edge of the fireplace where he chipped his tooth. The chair I always sat in to sew while he did homework on the floor. He reached out and touched the doorknob. "I remember this always squeaked," he said with a weak smile. "It still does. I thought you'd have fixed it by now." "I left it alone," I said. "It was part of the story." We stood in silence for a long moment. The air between us was full of things unsaid, regrets, small betrayals, broken understandings. Finally, he spoke. "I was wrong. I know. I didn't see what she was doing. Not clearly. Not until it was too late. She didn't hide it, Noah. You just didn't want to look." He swallowed, hard eyes down. "I lost something here, didn't I?" "Yes," I said. "But you left it behind. It didn't fall. You dropped it." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Will you be okay here?" I looked around the room, the one I had once walked through in the dark, crying, quietly afraid of becoming a burden. The one that now echoed with my own breathing, steady and whole. "Yes," I said. "I was okay before. I'll be okay after." He nodded, then opened the door. Sunlight streamed in. He stepped into it. And then he was gone. After they left, the silence was deafening. Not because it was empty, but because it was mine again. For the first few days, I moved quietly through the house like someone walking through an old museum. I touched the doorknobs, the window latches, the floorboards. I whispered names out loud just to see if the house remembered them. It did. This place knew me. It always had. I pulled the quilt out of the garage. The one I made the winter Noah had pneumonia. The corners were worn thin, but the stitching still held. I draped it over my armchair like a battle flag returned from exile. I brought back my recipe binder and placed it on the kitchen counter. I returned the Bible to the living room shelf. One by one, the pieces came back, not just the objects, but the stories inside them. One morning, I found a letter in the mailbox. It was from Delilah, neatly typed. No greeting. Just a statement. I hope you'll reconsider leaving the house to Noah. It should be part of the baby's future. He won't hold a grudge. We can move past this, but you need to be fair. Fair. That word, again. As if fairness was a scale that weighed paint colors and throw pillows against 20 years of sacrifice. I didn't respond. I put the letter in the fire that night and watched the flames eat the paper slowly, like it had no appetite for her either. One day, I went up to the attic. It had been years since I'd set foot up there. The dust was thick, the air musty, but the boxes were where I left them. I opened one, and inside was a shoebox full of letters. My husband's letters to me during the first year of our marriage when he worked 2 jobs to pay off the land. Before the foundation was even poured. Before Noah was even born. One day this dirt will be something. A house. Our house. And every time you sit inside it, I hope you remember how much I love you. I cried over that box. Not out of sadness, but out of clarity. This house wasn't just wood and stone. It was a love letter, and I had read every word of it. That night, I lit every lamp in the house. I let it glow warm, soft, alive. I made soup from scratch. I played an old song on the record player. I opened the windows and let the summer air drift in the sound of cicadas humming softly like applause from a distant audience that had watched me endure without ever saying a word. I didn't need them to. I was here, still, standing. They may have walked away, but they didn't take me with them. The room used to be Noah's, once bright yellow with racing car decals and a ceiling that glowed with stars. I'd painted it myself on my knees one afternoon in late spring belly round, with him still inside me, humming lullabies into the walls like the plaster would remember them better than he would. Later, it became Delilah's project space. She stripped the yellow, painted it a grim beige, and put up a gallery wall of inspirational quotes in gold foil. None of them were about motherhood. Now it was mine again. I stood at the threshold with a paint roller in one hand and a bucket in the other. Pale blue this time, soft like the sky just before dawn. I painted over every last quote, every curated shelf, every fake plant and trendy vase. I took my time. Each stroke of paint felt like erasure but also reclamation. They had tried to redefine my space, molded into something sterile and tasteful, something that didn't echo with memory. But this room, it would be full of stories again. Mine. I turned it into a sewing room. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I opened the cedar chest and pulled out my old Singer machine, brushed off the dust, ran my fingers over the wheel like greeting an old friend. The cabinet creaked as I opened it, but it still held my fabric stash, florals, linens, old scraps from Noah's baby clothes. One by one, I spread them across the table. Each square had a name, a season, a memory. The blue duck print I used to make his first pajama set. The plaid from the apron I wore every Thanksgiving. The ivory cotton I never used, always saving it for something special. I realized I was that something special. I sat down and began to sew. At first, my hands trembled. I hadn't sewn anything in years. But the rhythm came back quickly. Press the pedal guide. The fabric breathe in time with the hum. By nightfall, I'd pieced together the first quilt square. And by the end of the week, I had finished half the top layer. Each stitch pulled together more than cloth. It was pulling me too, rethreading the parts of myself I thought had frayed beyond repair. The neighbors started to notice. Mrs. Halverson from across the street dropped by one morning with a pie and a question. I saw the curtains change, she said. Looks lovely, Maggie. Did you do them yourself? I nodded. Decided it was time to reclaim a few things. She smiled knowingly. Well, about time. Then she leaned in. And if you ever need a hand or someone to chat with over coffee, you know where to find me? It had been years since I'd had a woman friend in this neighborhood. Delilah kept people at arm's length, made sure I did too. She didn't like visitors who might see the cracks in her story, but the house always felt lonelier with its doors closed. I started baking again, not out of duty, but joy. The smell of cinnamon and clove drifted through the house like a hymn. I sent loaves of banana bread to the twins next door, sugar cookies to the mailman. People started waving again when they passed. One woman even left a note on my porch. We missed you. Welcome home. The attic became my archive. I labeled each box. Photos, letters, receipts from the hardware store, my journals, even my hospital bracelets from when Noah was born. I wasn't hoarding the past. I was preserving it. Because someday someone might want to know the truth. And this time, they'd have it. Unedited, unerased, unapologetically mine. There was a knock at the door one Saturday morning. It was Noah. Alone again. No suitcase, no pleading expression. Just a box in his hands. I found this, he said, holding it out to me. It was my old recipe book, the one I thought was lost during the kitchen remodel. Torn in the corners, flour dusted, full of my handwriting. You saved it? I asked, surprised. He nodded. I knew she didn't like it. Said it was clutter. I hid it before she could toss it. I took it carefully. Flipped through the pages. Notes in the margins. Little hearts from when Noah helped me bake. I looked up. Why now? He shrugged. I don't know. I didn't want it to be gone. Like everything else. We sat on the porch that evening. Not in the tense silence of past weeks, but in something quieter, almost kind. He didn't apologize again, and I didn't ask him to. Some wounds close without words. Some just need time and presence. I think he saw the house differently now. Not as a prize or an inheritance, but as a breathing thing. A witness? It had seen us all at our worst. And it was still standing. So was I. I hung the finished quilt on the wall of my new room. A tapestry of memory. Every patch sewn from hunger and hope. Every stitch a proof of life. And when I sat in that room, light pouring through the curtains, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like a woman who had claimed her name again. Margaret Dawson, mother, builder, survivor. It was a Thursday afternoon when she came. I was folding laundry in the living room, towels still warm from the dryer, soft and smelling of lavender, when I heard the knock. Not urgent, not hesitant, just steady. I opened the door and there she stood. Mid-20s, brown hair pulled into a long braid, nervous eyes behind round glasses. A floral dress, plain but clean. She held her purse close like it carried something fragile. Hi, she said almost in a whisper. Are you Margaret Dawson? I nodded slowly. Yes. And you are? My name is Elsie, she said, voice quivering. I think I might be your granddaughter. I didn't speak for several seconds. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. The eyes were too familiar. Not Noah's, but someone else's. My mother's? Deep-set, quiet, heavy with wondering. They looked like they'd seen the same winters I had. May I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked in as though afraid she might disturb something. Her gaze moved over the house, soft with reverence. I didn't know what to expect, she said. But it smells like fresh bread. I didn't think homes did that anymore. We sat at the kitchen table. She cradled a cup of tea I offered her, like it was the first warm thing she'd had in weeks. I didn't grow up with Noah, she said after a long pause. My mother, she left him before I was born, said it was better that way. I stared into my own cup. I didn't even know who my father was until last year, she continued. She gave me his name on her deathbed. Noah Dawson. I looked him up, found a few records. Then I found this address. She opened her purse and pulled out a worn photo. It was of Noah at 7, wearing the overalls I patched twice, standing in front of this very house with a chocolate ice cream stain on his chin. You had this? I asked, shocked. My mother kept it hidden. In a shoebox. There were no other pictures. I reached across the table and touched the photo. My fingertips trembled. So did hers. I don't want anything, she said quickly. I'm not here for money. Or a place to stay. I just, I wanted to see where he came from. Where I came from. If that's okay, I nodded. It took me a moment to find my voice. You can stay for dinner. We cooked together. She chopped vegetables with the same care I used to teach Noah. She asked thoughtful questions about the recipes, laughed softly at my jokes. She moved around my kitchen like she belonged. That night, we sat on the porch with plates balanced on our laps. Cicadas buzzing in the distance, stars beginning to prick through the navy sky. She told me stories about her mother, about her illness, her strength, her stubbornness. I told her stories about Noah as a boy, how he used to run naked through the sprinkler, how he once buried a pack of hot dogs because he thought they'd grow into a tree. We laughed. Then we cried. After dinner, she asked if she could see the room. Noah's room? I hesitated. But then I led her up the stairs, opened the door, let her walk into the space I'd reclaimed. She stood there quietly for a long time. It's peaceful, she said, like someone finally forgave themselves here. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Before she left, she stood at the door, one hand on the frame. I don't know if I'll see you again, she said, but I'm glad I came. I feel like I found a missing piece, even if the puzzle is still scattered. I touched her arm gently. You're welcome here, Elsie. Anytime. She smiled. That same quiet smile my own mother wore when she was proud of me but didn't know how to say it. All right, she promised. And then she walked away, disappearing into the twilight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed with the photo she had left behind, Noah, 7 years old, smiling despite the mess on his chin. I saw him again, but not as the man who betrayed me. I saw the boy, the one who made me a mother, the one I raised with every sacrifice I had to offer, and now perhaps the one who had left something good behind without even knowing. I opened my journal, wrote down her name, Elsie Margaret Dawson, just in case I ever needed to remember. Or in case she ever came back and needed to know where she came from. Not from wealth, not from a perfect family, but from a woman who built something out of hunger and heartbreak and still made room for love to return. Noah came back 2 days later. I heard his car before I saw it. The familiar hum of that dented silver sedan, the one I helped him buy when he got his first real job. I was out in the garden, hands in the soil, coaxing life out of earth that had seen drought and frost and still managed to bloom. When he stepped onto the grass, I didn't look up right away. I heard she came, he said softly. Elsie, he nodded. I didn't know she existed, he continued, like he needed me to say I believed him. I did, but I didn't say it yet. Instead, I stood and dusted off my hands, looking at him squarely. You want to come in? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. Inside, everything felt different. The air didn't hold tension. It held questions. We sat at the table, the same one where Elsie had sat, her fingers wrapped around a teacup like she was anchoring herself to something solid. I owe you more than an apology, Noah began. I owe you honesty. I raised an eyebrow. You think you can manage that now? He flinched. But to his credit, he didn't walk away this time. I didn't mean to destroy everything he said. When Delilah pushed for control of the house, God, I was weak. I thought if I gave her what she wanted, she'd stop treating you like a nuisance. I told myself I was protecting you. I laughed once, short and sharp. You don't protect someone by handing them over to the enemy. He looked down at his hands. They were never supposed to kick you out, he said. It got out of control. I didn't even know she'd gone through with it until you were already gone. I tried to come here to fix it, but you tried nothing. I cut in. You let them lock me out of the very house I built. You let your wife call me a burden. And you did it with silence, Noah. That's what hurt most. He didn't argue. Maybe he finally knew better. I want to make it right, he said quietly. I leaned back, folded my arms. And what does right look like to you? He swallowed. I want to take my name off the deed. Completely. You should own this house, not me. Not us. Just you. For a moment, I just stared at him. Because it wasn't just a legal shift. It was an admission. A surrender. A bowing of the head in the direction of truth. I nodded once. That would be a start. I've left, Delilah, he added. Papers are filed. I raised an eyebrow. She didn't want to raise Elsie, he said. Didn't want a child that came before her. That wasn't hers. She called her a mistake. I winced. And what do you call her? I asked. He paused, then looked me in the eye. A second chance. It wasn't a redemption arc. It wasn't that simple. But it was a beginning. We spent the afternoon going through the house together. He hadn't seen the changes. My sewing room, the restored attic, the new shelves in the hallway lined with old photos. He stopped in front of one, a black and white snapshot of me holding baby Noah. I don't remember this, he said. You were only a week old, I replied. He touched the edge of the frame. You look tired, but happy. I was both, I said. Always both. We ended in the kitchen. He stood awkwardly by the counter while I pulled fresh biscuits from the oven. I told Elsie she could come back, I said. He looked surprised. You did. She came with nothing but a photo and questions. She left with love. She's part of this family now, whether you were ready for her or not. He nodded slowly. I want to know her. I want to be better for her. I handed him a biscuit. Then don't waste your second chance. That evening, I wrote up a document and made an appointment with my lawyer. By the end of the week, the house was back in my name. Fully. Legally, my name alone. That Sunday, I held a small dinner, just me, Noah, and Elsie. We ate on mismatched plates, used cloth napkins I'd sewn years ago, talked over roasted chicken and lemon pie. Elsie told a joke that made Noah laugh harder than I'd heard in years. And I saw it just for a moment how things could shift. Not reset, not erase, but evolve into something stronger. After they left, I sat on the porch alone. The stars blinked above the crickets, sang their nightly hymn, and I felt it again, the heartbeat of this house steady beneath my feet. No longer haunted, no longer stolen, mine, on my terms, with my name etched into its foundation not because it was granted to me, but because I built it. Through hunger, through sacrifice, through love no one else remembered to honor. I never thought I'd end up in a courtroom with my own son. But life has a way of circling back to things we thought we'd buried, memories, regrets, unfinished business. And this time it came with a subpoena. Delilah was suing for partial ownership of the house. Yes, after she and Noah separated. After he removed his name from the deed. She claimed she'd contributed financially over the years and was entitled to something. I sat in that courtroom flanked by my lawyer and a folder thick with receipts, emails, and photographs. Across the aisle, she sat in a sleek black suit, lips pressed into a line, eyes darting toward me but never holding. Noah didn't speak to her, didn't sit with her. He sat behind me. Quiet. Present. It mattered more than I expected. When the judge called my name, I stood tall. My name is Margaret Dawson, I said, and I built that house with my own hands. I didn't inherit it. I didn't win it in a divorce. I didn't buy it on credit. I built it brick by brick, meal by skipped meal, hour by unpaid hour. Gasps rippled across the courtroom, soft and quick, like birds startled into flight. Delilah's lawyer stood up. Mrs. Dawson, the question is about monetary contribution, not sentiment. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Sentiment, I said. Is that what we call 25 years of sacrifice now? I spoke clearly, slowly, letting the weight of each word settle. I was a single mother. I worked double shifts in a diner. I patched clothes instead of buying new ones. I fixed pipes with duct tape and prayed every winter that the heater would hold. That house wasn't just paid for, it was lived in too. My lawyer handed me a binder. I opened it. Here are the receipts, I said. For every property tax, every roof repair, every nail I ever bought from the hardware store down the road. I turned to the judge. Delilah never paid a cent. She wanted the house because it was convenient, not because she earned it. The silence in the room grew thick. Then the judge spoke. I've seen enough. Her gavel struck once, final firm. Motion to claim partial ownership is denied. The deed shall remain solely in the name of Margaret Dawson. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered like crows. One asked, "How does it feel to win against your own family?" I didn't stop walking, but I said, without turning my head, this wasn't a win. It was a reminder. That silence can destroy things louder than any argument. That night, I walked through the house like I was seeing it again for the first time. Touched the wallpaper in the hallway I hung by myself. Ran my hand along the stair railing. I varnished the night before Noah's 12th birthday. Stood in the kitchen where I had once scraped the last of a soup pot into 2 bowls, one for him, one for me, and gone to bed with a grumbling stomach. I never wanted to fight for this house. I wanted it to hold peace. Legacy, a warm place to return to. But sometimes even peace must be defended. Even love must be protected in writing. Noah came by the next day. He knocked first, something he never used to do when he was younger. I let him in without a word. He held a manila envelope. I recognized the Seal family court. I filed to add Elsie to my will, he said. She gets everything. He placed the envelope on the table like it weighed more than it should. I want her to have what I never appreciated. I want her to have roots. I knotted my throat tight. She already does, I whispered, even if she doesn't know it yet. We had tea, the two of us. No apologies, no rehearsed lines, just presence. And for the first time in years, I saw a man I didn't recognize. Not the boy I raised. Not the man who betrayed me, but someone in between. Someone trying, and maybe that was enough. That evening, I found an old photo album tucked behind some boxes in the attic. I hadn't looked at it in decades. The pages were yellowed edges curling, but the memories were sharp. Me holding Noah at a fair. Noah with missing teeth holding up a best pumpkin ribbon. Our old living room before the renovations, wallpaper peeling but full of warmth. I added a new photo to the front. Elsie sitting at the table smiling softly. It didn't match the others in color or style, but it matched in spirit. It belonged, just like she did. The first time I handed my son a key to the house, he was 15. It was brass worn at the edges. I'd tied a piece of red ribbon through the hole, something to make it feel special. You're growing up, I'd told him. This house will always be yours to come home to. Back then, it felt like I was giving him something sacred, a token of trust, a part of myself. But somewhere along the way, the meaning of that key changed. And so did he. Elsie showed up again one morning in August unannounced. I opened the door and she stood there with a backpack slung over one shoulder, a notebook pressed to her chest. I didn't know where else to go, she said. But I thought maybe this place could be part of mine too. She didn't ask for a room. She didn't ask for permission. She asked for something quieter, belonging. I stepped aside and let her in. In the weeks that followed, we settled into a rhythm. She was quiet, curious. Her laughter was softer than Noah's had been at her age. But there was a gentleness in her, a hunger not for food, but for history. For stories? She asked questions over breakfast, sat with me in the garden learning how to prune roses and when to water tomatoes. She even helped repaint the front porch, her hands steady even as the summer sun beat down. You love this place, she said once, brushing a strand of paint-streaked hair from her forehead. I am this place, I replied. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching dusk settle over the yard, she turned to me. Why didn't you ever move? She asked. I blinked. I mean, after all that? The betrayal, the legal mess, the pain. Why didn't you just sell it? Start fresh. I looked at her, this girl who shared my blood but not my past. And I told her the truth. Because this house is not just walls and windows. It's where I went hungry so my son could eat. It's where I cried in the laundry room so he wouldn't see. It's where I stitched together a life from scraps. Selling it would be like erasing myself. She nodded slowly, not speaking for a while. Then she whispered, I want to learn how to do that. How to stay somewhere and grow roots. How to build, not run. The next morning, I took a small wooden box from the drawer in my bedroom. Inside it were 2 keys. One was the original brass key I'd given Noah years ago. The other was new silver, unmarked with a shine that hadn't dulled yet. I walked to the table where Elsie was reading. She looked up. I placed the silver key in front of her. She didn't touch it. Instead, her eyes welled up and she whispered, Really? I nodded. You're part of this house now, not because you share blood, but because you show up, because you listen, because you care. She picked up the key carefully like it might crumble in her hand. I won't lose it, she said. I know, I replied. That night, I went into the attic one last time. There were things I'd packed away, things from Noah's childhood I'd thought I might pass on one day. Blankets, old toys, even his first school report card. I opened the box with trembling fingers, pulled out a photo. It was me and Noah in front of the house years ago. He couldn't have been more than 6. I turned it over. In my handwriting, I'd written, "Built with love, held together by will." I left it in the hallway outside Elsie's room. No note, just the photo. She didn't mention it the next day, but I noticed it tucked between the pages of her notebook later. She had claimed it just like she was beginning to claim her story. Noah came by that weekend. Not to stay, just to check in. He asked how Elsie was doing, and I told him the truth. "She's growing," I said. "She's putting down roots." He nodded slowly. I missed that he admitted. "The part where you teach by just being." "You still can," I said, "but you'll have to earn your place back. The key isn't waiting for you anymore." He didn't ask for it, didn't seem to expect it, but he looked grateful just the same. That night, I stood in the doorway of the house. The porch light flickered slightly. The wiring needed fixing again, but the air was warm. The floorboards under my feet felt solid. And from inside, I heard Elsie laughing at something on the radio. This house was never just a structure. It was a story, one I was still writing. But for the first time in years, I wasn't writing it alone. Copy edit. My name is Margaret Hall. I built a house with the times I went hungry, with hours no one paid me for, with tears I swallowed so my son wouldn't see me break. And my son destroyed it all, with a shake of his head. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story, because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. The end wasn't dramatic. There was no final confrontation, no teary-eyed speech, no music swelling in the background. Just quiet. A different kind of silence than I had known before, the kind that didn't come from neglect or distance, but from peace. Elsie had taken to gardening with a vengeance. Our backyard, once patchy and dry, now bloomed with wild flowers and orderly rows of tomatoes, beans, and herbs. She painted the mailbox pale yellow, hung wind chimes by the kitchen window, even baked her first pie. I taught her how to make the crust from scratch. She taught me how to laugh without bitterness. One evening, I sat in my armchair watching the sun dip below the edge of the porch railing. The light hit the hallway just right, illuminating the family photo wall I had started anew. Noah's face was still there, though smaller, tucked in a corner. Beside it, Elsie, laughing mid-bite at a birthday dinner I threw for her just weeks earlier. She was wearing an apron 2 sizes too big, cheeks flushed from blowing out candles. Underneath was the photo I'd left her, the one of me and Noah when he was 6. They belonged on the same wall, not because they were perfect, but because they were pieces of the same imperfect story. A letter came from Noah not long after, handwritten. He apologized not with excuses but with understanding. He wrote that he'd spent years trying to find success outside of what I built, and only now realized he had inherited more than blood. He'd inherited legacy, and he'd rejected it. But what moved me most was the last line. "You taught me how to build a home. I just didn't see it until someone else opened the door to let me back in." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some things, when truly heard, don't need to echo. Elsie came in from the garden one night, dirt under her fingernails, sun in her smile. "There's a candlelight writing contest," she said. "Theme is the house that made me. Should I enter?" I looked at her for a long moment. Only I said, "If you tell the truth." She grinned. "Which part?" "All of it," I said, "even the parts that hurt." Later that night, when the house had quieted and the crickets hummed their lullaby, I walked the rooms one more time, touched the edges of doorways where Noah used to measure his height, ran my hand along the banister that Elsie had helped repaint, listened to the soft hum of the ceiling fan. I had grown old in this place, but for the first time I didn't feel tired. I stood at the front window. The porch light was on, just like I used to leave it when Noah was out late, back when he was still mine. Only now it stayed on for someone else. Someone who never asked for anything but gave everything I'd once begged for. Presence, respect, home. They say the house holds the spirit of its keeper. If that's true, then mine must be whispering at night, reminding its new keeper that it was never about walls and windows. It was about witnessing, holding space for someone else's becoming, and finally being held in return. So if you ever pass by a modest white house with chipped steps, wildflowers out front, and a light that never turns off, know this. That house was built by a woman who once went hungry and saved every piece of herself in its bones. And if you're still listening, I want to say this. You are never too old to protect what's sacred, and never too broken to start again. So tell your story quietly or loudly, but tell it, because someone somewhere needs to know they're not alone. If this story reminded you of someone or something you lost or fought for, share it in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribed to Grace's Truth, because sometimes the quietest voices hold the loudest truths.